Good morning, guys. Welcome to my Compound Live. I'm your host, Jonathan. It's good to see you all. This is a channel where we build assets. We build great habits to manage all of our assets. And of course, that will all lead to freedom. That should really be financial freedom, time freedom for you, me, and everyone else that watches my channel. And in today's video, this is a Bitcoin daily video. So by the way, I make Bitcoin video on a daily basis. So remember to hit the like, hit subscribe. Let me know in the comment section who you are. If you're my new subscribers, say hi or give me comment, give me feedback. I really appreciate that. So I'm a new content creator, very, very limited in terms of subscribers, but somehow I feel extremely happy today because I've made my 100th subscribers, right? So currently on 103, and I really appreciate every one of you that has subscribed to my channel. So let's get started. It's the 9th of January, the Friday. Time of recording is around 10:50 a.m. in the morning. I'm in the UK. In the West Midlands, so it's very, very snowy out there. At the time of recording, Bitcoin price is around 90,500. Bitcoin is trading around 89,000 to about 91,500 in the past 24 hours. Of course, it went down a small 1% or less, starting from around 91,000, hitting a high near 91,500, and a low around 89,500. As a reminder, we are still 28% away from the previous all-time high in 8th of October last year of around $126,000 Bitcoin. So Bitcoin past 24 hours, certainly it has had a quick tumble, went down below 90,000, then up again very, very quickly. And that really matters because it shows buyers, thank you buyers, thank you, individual, for your constant buy on Bitcoin to maintain the price. And of course, good news, at least one of the CME gap got covered. Okay, so there's still another one, which is a lot more down. I think 80,000, 82,000-ish. But we'll get there. We'll get there eventually. But of course, I think it's not just to call out. It's the CME gap that's causing the Bitcoin price to drop, right? There are, of course, other news that would, especially from the macro side, that will affect the price action. So what I'm trying to bring out is the fact that many of you might not like to listen to this, but the fact that we historically, these are all the Bitcoin price action for the 4-year cycle. So the white one is the current cycle, as you can see. The shadow line that's showing when Bitcoin price is at its all-time high, which obviously have passed. And then usually after the Bitcoin hits its all-time high, usually for the coming 12 months, Bitcoin will be going lower. And that we call them the Bitcoin bear market. Okay, so will we get a prolonged Bitcoin cycle? I don't know, right? But from knowing the trends, looking at the trends, we need to be mindful and not have too much hopium. And to bear that in mind, there could be a possibility, right? I'm thinking that possibility is probably a 60-70% that we are actually heading into a bear market, right? So bear that in mind. And of course, there are a lot of, catalysts coming. There are arguments that we are going through a ISM business cycle. There'll be more liquidity getting injected through quantitative easing. And then the midterm election is coming, and usually midterm election will lead on to equity to pump, and then eventually that's going to cascade down into Bitcoin. But that's never guaranteed, so bear that in mind, guys, and be extremely careful of who you listen to, but certainly follow through the trends of what's going on right now. And it does seem we are in more of a bearish trend, because Bitcoin is currently still trading. I mean, at least it has gone back up onto the 50 days moving average. But certainly for us to be extremely bullish with Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin price has to get back up to this line. That's the 200 days moving average, at least. Okay. And of course, to be even more bullish, I think somehow, Bitcoin price will have to, the 50 days moving average will have to at least cross back into the and stay above the 200 days moving average, right? Right now, we're not. This is the Bitcoin price. We are only above the 50 days moving average. It will be a slow grind up, at least a good couple of months before we can even get back to that 200 days moving average of around $106,000 per Bitcoin. So for now, the whole situation, we are in a death cross as indicated here on the red line here. And then, what we're trying to get to is for the 50 days moving average to cross above that 200 days moving average to indicate that that's a golden cross moving forward. Okay, so yeah, bear that in mind. And let's move on to the fear and greed index right now. Fear and greed index, we are currently 26. Yesterday we were in I think yesterday we were at 29. Okay, so we only, technically speaking, had 2 days of neutral and 5 days of fear, right? At least compared to during Christmas period, we were mainly at fear and a couple of days of extreme fear, right? So we are slowly grinding up, and it does seem that we should hopefully get more neutral days as opposed to fear days. So overall, I think that's good. In terms of ETF, yesterday, 8th of Jan, it was bearish for Bitcoin. Total daily net outflow, it's a negative $398 million. And I think BlackRock had the largest outflow of 193 million, followed by Fidelity. It does seem the whole Bitcoin ETF optimism kind of faded, right? We had essentially these 3 days worth of outflow totally erased the early months gain, the bullishness that we've gained, right? Totally just wiped that away, right? So ETF money out over, I think, $1 billion in a matter of 3 days. And seems no one wants Bitcoin at all, right? Even with all of the great news coming great news that we anticipate coming, doesn't seem anyone wants Bitcoin. I think why it matters, because early January is now out, it does show very, very less interest in the Bitcoin asset, even in the traditional financial system on the Bitcoin ETF asset. So somehow for the short term, Bitcoin will still be deemed risky. I think still pretty bearish in the sense that investors or traders doesn't want to continue with the buy. Okay, so overall for the week, we're gonna close negative. Compared to last week, we're gonna close negative. I don't think we'll have much inflow today. So compared to last week, I mean, it was positive inflow of 458 million. So far, Monday to Thursday's worth of data for Bitcoin ETF, we are already 431 million worth of outflow. Not good. Okay, moving on to Ethereum. What's Ethereum price right now? Ethereum price is around 3,000. I think it went up briefly to about 3,100 yesterday. But anyway, $3,000 for Ethereum. Let's take a quick look in terms of ETH ETF. Ethereum ETF, same as Bitcoin outflow. Okay, so 159 million worth of outflow. Major outflow from BlackRock, followed by Grayscale. Okay, and as a result, Ethereum's weekly, it's still in the green, with a total inflow of 25 million. Okay, much less compared to last week. And for Solana, let's see the Solana price. Solana price is 138. I think that's pretty okay. I think it briefly went up to about 140 yesterday. But anyway, 138, not too bad. And for Solana, for 8th of Jan, yesterday's data, Solana had a pretty decent inflow of $13.6 million. And majority comes from Bitwise, okay, followed by Grayscale. And so far, I think Solana is the one exceptionally better performing one, because it, throughout all of the weeks, it's actually bullish, right, for weekly inflow. And of course, outflow, I think, based on just 8 days worth of Jan's data, I think Solana will definitely progress and improve, and overtake December's total inflow. Okay, so that's it for the ETF. Now let's move into news that moves Bitcoin price. Okay, so one that I want to cover is Supreme Court tariffs decision on Trump's tariffs. That will be today, US time, at around 10 a.m. So sometime in the afternoon, our time in the UK, we should hear back. So I want to chat a little bit about this. Okay, let me see whether I can bring in Polymarket's data. Yeah, that's Polymarket's data. Okay, I want to chat about this quite extensively because I don't think many of you know the severity of this. So if you know, I guess you also been through the tariff pain sometime in April last year. Well, at least it was a pain enough that it made some sense, that enables me to, acquire some cheaper assets. So drop a like, let me know in the comment section if you also managed to acquire some cheaper assets back in April tariff turmoil last year. So at least in the Polymarket's prediction, the current odds would be 75% the court rules the tariffs, Trump's tariffs as illegal. So here's the situation. If the government loses money, right, who do you think pays for it? Right now, markets are saying there's a high chance that Trump's era tariffs gets ruled illegal by the Supreme Court, right? So this sounds like politics, but it's not, trust me, because this is about money deficits, okay? So the whole situation, it's going to get blown up, and a lot of it, it's not politics, left or right or whatever, right? But it's more about the money. And this will have an implication on the US debt as well as money deficit, and whether the government can still afford the stimulus check of $2,000, which I kind of anticipate, although I'm not in the US, but I kind of anticipate that the 2,000 USD stimulus check will rally a little bit. Remember, like the COVID period, there was some stimulus, furlough, whatever US call it. I think in the UK we call them furlough, right? But anyway, there has been some stimulus check also during COVID period, and that's when Bitcoin price rally, right? So I do care about, whether this ruling, if it's being ruled illegal, will we still get will the US people still get the tariff check? So what you need to know is tariffs equal government cash. So first, very simple, tariffs are basically taxes on imports. When companies, they bring goods into the US, they immediately, before it gets onto the consumer, they pay money to the government. That money is already collected. Okay. So if the Supreme Court rules against these tariffs, the government may have to refund that money back to the companies. So essentially, that's cash immediately leaving the US government's account, worsening government finances and increasing budget pressure immediately, almost immediately, right? So a few things to look into, right? Tariffs, an announcement, right? Potential government shutdown. I'm not saying that it might happen, right? I'm not saying that it will happen, but it might happen, right? So real money. So just a recap, during the government shutdown, low liquidity, right? And then some argue that that could be the cause that Bitcoin dropped from 126,000 to about low 80s or high 70-ish, right? So that's the kind of situation or uncertainty that we need to be prepared for, right? So with this tariffs announcement, right, from the Supreme Court, essentially it would lead to real money walking out the door of the US government. Okay, so of course, US has that deficit problem. I've covered this in some of my earlier videos, so you guys should check that out. So to explain simply what that means now, because it's such a huge issue, right? Those tariffs were expected to reduce the US deficit by nearly $3 trillion over 10 years, right? So I think US debt is about 38 trillion, and this should rightfully help a huge chunk of it. So if the tariffs are struck down, this saving disappear, right? That money disappear. So no backup plan, no replacement income, just a huge hole again in the US balance sheet. So what happens when the US government run a bigger deficit? Essentially, they have three options to fix it, and I know very likely you guys would probably know which option it is, but number one is to either raise taxes, and that will be painful. Look at us in the UK, how painful it is when Rachel Reeves comes in and raise more taxes on personal income, on businesses, or even our crypto gains, right? Come on, that's terrible. And secondly, they can do so through cutting off spend, right? And in the US, this will be impossible. Look at, US, they're claiming that they'll be going to a war soon, and then somehow, I think, I don't know where I got the stats from. I think it was 1.1 trillion for the military budget, and then they want to raise it to about 1.5 trillion. So crazy money. So that there've been no ways of cuts. And of course, they can always borrow and print more money, and that's exactly what US will be doing, right? So all I care most now is, will all of this kill the 2000 Trump stimulus check, right? So the 2000 stimulus check per middle class, for each middle class person, if tariffs revenue disappear, it doesn't mean the stimulus check will be cancelled, but it does mean something important. The money has to come from somewhere else, and that somewhere else is more government borrowing, more treasury issuance, more pressure on the Fed to reduce rate cut, and of course higher chance of money printing. So you guys know where I'm coming from right now, right? So the check might still arrive, but it's funded with future debt and not really real income. And I like that, right? Because that is why it will cause Bitcoin to pump, right? I think this is the point that I'm trying to get into, like all of this malarkey, and eventually get into my main point. That is how this becomes, how the whole situation, it's again setting up Bitcoin slowly. So let's connect the dot, right? If tariffs falls, government revenue drops, deficit grows, stimulus relies more on debt, of course, and rate cut becomes more likely, right? Because, I've been talking about, I've been keeping track of Polymarket's prediction on whether will we get a rate cut or not, yada, yada, yada. I think it has to come, right? With all of this in mind, it has to come. Certainly, Polymarket doesn't think so, but I think it will come. So I think this is not the bullish because things are strong in the US, but I think to a sense bullish for Bitcoin because the system in the US, the financial system in the US, and for anywhere else in the world, it's breaking, right? So what does that mean to Bitcoin price? I think for the short term, immediately at 10 a.m. in the US, when the Supreme Court made the decision, market makers going to come in and manipulate the hell out of at least the Bitcoin and crypto market, right? So it will be negative for Bitcoin if tariffs rule out illegal because of uncertainty. And I think will cause price to fall. And then maybe even fall until we covered the January's CME gap. But in the longer term, right, bear in mind, I think it will be bullish because of that setup that I've just mentioned, that the US government's going to have to print and print and print, reduce rate, etc., just to get all of this going. Yeah, so I hope you guys feel slightly bullish after knowing this. But it does seem there will be some short-term bearish, short-term pain coming. Okay, another news that I think will affect the Bitcoin price. So Trump announces $200 billion bond purchase in bid to lower mortgage rates. So again, Trump is silently applying quantitative easing, right? Without Fed's help, right? He's like doing it himself. So he ordered $200 billion to buy mortgage bonds to lower home rates. Okay. And essentially he's doing this to make people feel good. People like Trump so that, it helps with the midterms coming, right? So he's doing it. He's got no more choice because Jerome Powell, he simply doesn't want to cut rates. So he'll have to do this somehow to make people still believe in him. So good for Trump, good for people, for the US. If you're from the US and you absolutely love this news, right, just drop a comment, let me know who you are, and do subscribe to me too. Yeah, I'm on 103. It would be nice to get to 105 or even 110s by next week. So help me up, guys. I'm a small content creator. So background, President Trump say to instruct representatives, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, to buy $200 billion mortgage-backed security. They call it MBS bonds from home loans. So the goal is to make mortgages rates down, monthly payment low, and to essentially make home buying a lot more affordable for the American people, right? Imagine if Rachel Reeves can do something like this in the UK, there will be less homeless people in the UK, right? So that's something to bear in mind, something Rachel Reeves or Keir Starmer can also consider as part of the playbook. So, of course, Fannie, Freddie, they do have cash. They are doing this without Fed or Treasury support. So this 200 billion was idle cash sitting on the sidelines. Now it's being deployed back into the financial system, right? Why it matters? Because this is kind of like a quantitative easing, another silent quantitative easing, but obviously not coming from the Fed, but it's coming from Trump. It prints money to essentially buy bonds, and it will help lower long-term rates, help housing market. The bond saving and disposable income will usually lead it back into spending in the economy, stimulating the economy, as well as some will always flow back into the financial system, right? So, of course, I do think that this news is very bullish for Bitcoin. Short-term wise, I think it's good news. It's exciting because it means more liquidity back into the system and less pressure on higher rates. And usually with cheaper money, it flows back into risk asset like our growth stocks, Tesla shares, Google, Nvidia, and even Bitcoin, right? So bear in mind, so it's all usually, cheap money. It flows back into the financial system, usually gets onto the growth stocks first, and then slowly it kind of cascade down into Bitcoin and crypto. So don't have your hopes high. I think this is good news. It definitely helps sustain the Bitcoin price a little bit to maintain at 90,000. US Wall Street's not going to open up and then immediately Bitcoin will get past that 95,000 resistance and become a support. It's not going to do so, right? There's too much sell pressure, right? And Bitcoin is just has more negative perceivedness as opposed to any positivity. So in the long run, it will definitely be beneficial for Bitcoin, right? Just in a few months' time. And also other macros that could affect the Bitcoin price. The jobs report data will be out today at around 8:30 a.m. in the morning. The US unemployment rate data expectation will be around 4.5%. So we'll see how that goes. I think anyhow, this will play out in both ways. Look at how the market makers are manipulating the data on almost on daily basis or every other days, right? So that's how I think it will all play out. Anyway, that's it for today. I think Bitcoin supply, Bitcoin demand, not supply, Bitcoin demand are disappearing. ETFs are all running away. The retail guys, not you. I'm sure many of you guys that watch us probably just buy spot Bitcoin through exchange. So the ETF retail old school people are just running away, but that's fine. I think somehow Bitcoin price is still holding at 90,000, so it's still bullish in a way, I hope. So I think that's it. Drop a like, hit subscribe, turn on notification. I do make Bitcoin video on a daily basis. I also make other evergreen Bitcoin video that talks about any other things about Bitcoin every other days. And of course, this is my Compound Life. It's a channel where we build assets, and by all means, the assets that we build in my Compound Life isn't just about Bitcoin. It's actually a lot of other assets too, which I haven't got time to cover. Eventually I will do, so remember to hit subscribe and follow my content. And of course, it's a channel that we, apart from building assets, we need to build great habits. And that great habit, by the way, will, for now, for Bitcoin, will be make sure you have a hodl bag as well as a swing bag. Hodl bag, you keep it forever and ever for your kids, for your grandkids, for your wife, for whomever, right? And then your swing back, this is where you try to make an income and to support your lifestyle when you are kind of going through your early retirement, like what I'm doing right now. And of course, my other habit is to create video for you guys. So I need you guys to help hit subscribe, hit the like, so that more people can discover my content too. So look forward to seeing you all in the next video. Thank you, and thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye.